Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a hard look at the challenges the United States faced right after 2001. We're not just, listing events.
No. The goal here is to really get into the causes and the long-term effects of that whole period.
Exactly. We're trying to understand how America navigated its power in a completely new and complex century.
And we've pulled together material that looks at these huge shifts in national security, these long, drawn-out geopolitical conflicts, and of course, the growing pressure of environmental accountability.
It's all about charting the U.S. role as the world's superpower, a role that was and still is often contested.
Right, especially during an era that felt like one crisis after another.
And the starting point for all of it.
Mm.
The one moment that just instantly reshaped everything about U.S. foreign policy and even national identity.
It has to be September 11th, 2001.
That attack, it created the lens through which almost everything that followed both at home and abroad was measured. So let's unpack that.
That day was a catalyst. Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial planes.
And as we all know, 2 hit the World Trade Center towers in New York.
1 crashed into the Pentagon, and the fourth went down in a field in Pennsylvania, but only because the passengers fought back.
The human cost was just staggering, nearly 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And the national reaction, it wasn't just shock. It was this sudden, unifying demand for action.
A ferocious demand, really. You heard commentators at the time saying it felt like Pearl Harbor.
A kind of collective trauma that just mobilized the entire country. The nation wanted justice. And that call for justice very quickly turned into military action.
Absolutely, and that mobilization led straight to Afghanistan. President George W. Bush gave an ultimatum.
And the Taliban regime, right, because they were harboring al-Qaeda.
Exactly. He said, hand over Osama bin Laden. They refused, and that refusal triggered the U.S. invasion.
And initially, the Taliban regime was overthrown pretty quickly.
Very quickly. But what started as this, rapid success, it didn't stay that way.
It morphed into something much, much more complicated, didn't it?
Huh.
It became this 20-year-long counterinsurgency campaign.
It did. And the reason is you had this transition from fighting a state, a traditional army, to fighting an enemy that was decentralized, adaptable.
The mission changed.
The mission changed completely. The goal wasn't just to win a battle. It was to build a stable state, nation building. And that's incredibly difficult.
Especially in a place like Afghanistan.
Right. The lack of state capacity, the shifting alliances. It all made finding bin Laden and establishing control an effort that stretched for 2 decades.
And bin Laden wasn't found until much later.
Not until 2011, under President Obama's administration. That's when he was finally located and killed.
But even before that, we saw what was maybe the most controversial military action of the era. The invasion of Iraq in 2003. The public justifications were, they were twofold. Alleged links between Saddam Hussein and 9/11 and the big one, weapons of mass destruction, WMDs.
And this is where the historical analysis gets really, really critical.
How so?
Because both of those justifications, the WMDs and the direct operational links to 9/11, they were later definitively disproven.
Which raises huge questions about U.S. credibility on the world stage.
Huge.
So, Saddam Hussein's regime was toppled. But if the core reasons for the war turned out to be false, what did that mean for the region? How did the U.S. manage the aftermath?
Well, the fallout was immense instability. The regime was gone, sure, but building a stable, U.S.-friendly democracy proved incredibly difficult. New insurgent groups emerged.
And this signaled a bigger change in U.S. policy, didn't it?
It was a fundamental change. It really was. This idea of acting on potential threats.
Can you explain that, this preemptive and preventive warfare doctrine?
So in simple terms, it was a break from the Cold War idea of deterrence, where you'd wait for a threat to actually materialize.
Okay.
This new doctrine argued that in an age of terrorism and catastrophic weapons, the U.S. had the right to act even unilaterally to neutralize threats before they could fully form.
And that must have caused a lot of debate globally.
Oh, it generated intense global debates about executive power, about international law. It profoundly altered how the world saw the U.S. not just as a global enforcer, but as a unilateral actor.
And that willingness to act on perceived threats, it didn't just stay overseas. It came right back home and reshaped life here.
Exactly. Let's pivot to the home front, because the war on terror prompted this massive domestic restructuring.
Creating that central tension we still live with today. National security versus civil liberties.
That's the classic American dilemma, and the fear after 9/11 brought it into really stark relief. The focus turned inward, and the government's security powers were radically overhauled.
Starting with the Patriot Acts in 2001 and 2003, the government said they were necessary to, connect the dots. But what do they mean for the average person?
The key effect was the expansion of government surveillance. The government gained a much broader ability to monitor communications, phones, emails.
And it went beyond that, right?
Oh, yeah. Things like national security letters, or NSLs. They let the FBI demand records about people without needing a traditional warrant.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changed the level of judicial oversight.
And that faced immediate pushback.
Absolutely. Critics like Senator Russ Feingold argued very forcefully that these acts violated core constitutional rights, especially Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches.
So it was a deep, fundamental disagreement.
A profound one, yeah, about whether the threat justified what could be a permanent change to the social contract.
And then, beyond laws, we saw the biggest government reorganization in decades. The Department of Homeland Security.
DHS, yeah. I mean, the scale was just immense.
Give us a sense of that scale.
It combined over 20 existing federal agencies. Think about it. The Coast Guard, the Secret Service, FEMA, all put under one roof to protect against terrorism.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It created incredible coordination challenges. You're merging all these different cultures and mandates, and you're doing it at a frantic pace.
And in this really charged environment, we also saw a lot of societal friction.
We did. Unfortunately, one of the enduring consequences was a documented rise in Islamophobia.
Widespread fear and prejudice.
Exactly. Against Muslim and Arab communities. It led to increased scrutiny, discrimination, and real concerns about religious freedom.
It added another complicated layer to that balancing act between security and human rights.
For sure. And we have to remember the key policymakers here. President George W. Bush, of course, but also figures like Condoleezza Rice as National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State.
They were pivotal in shaping these policies.
Pivotal in shaping counterterrorism strategy and trying to reform the intelligence failures that 9/11 itself had exposed.
Okay, so we've got the geopolitical conflicts and the domestic security overhaul. Let's connect this to another major consequence, the impact on energy and the environment.
Right, because all this conflict in the Middle East, it brought the debate over fossil fuel dependence roaring back to life.
The massive military projection alone must have required enormous amounts of energy.
Enormous. But beyond that, the conflicts constantly highlighted the geopolitical risk of relying on Middle Eastern oil.
This wasn't a new idea, though, was it?
Well, no. Protecting oil resources was a big motivation for the Gulf War back in the 90s. But the post-9/11 wars brought it into much sharper focus.
How so?
Every bit of instability in the region, whether it was in Iraq or just concerns over shipping lanes like the Strait of Hormuz, it had immediate costly effects on U.S. energy security. Protecting those supply lines was a top priority.
And at the same time, a different conversation was gaining steam. Not just about energy security, but about climate change itself.
Exactly. You had figures like Al Gore and the scientific community really starting to connect the dots for the public between our reliance on fossil fuels and global warming.
The focus shifted to the potential for catastrophic consequences.
Right. The conversation changed from, do we have enough gas, to what is the gas itself doing to our planet?
And this issue became incredibly polarized in Washington.
It did. It's a classic partisan divide. Democrats generally pushed for regulating carbon-producing industries, for government intervention.
All Republicans.
Republicans often raised concerns about the economic cost of those regulations, and some questioned the extent of human contribution to global warming.
So you had this core conflict. Short-term economic and military needs versus long-term environmental sustainability.
It's the ultimate paradox. The U.S. military, which is needed to project global power, is one of the world's largest consumers of fossil fuels.
So the very act of protecting the global system contributes to the environmental crisis threatening that same system.
Precisely.
And yet, despite all of this, the prolonged wars, the recessions, the domestic turmoil, the environmental crisis, the United States was still the world's leading superpower.
How? Yeah, how did it manage to hold on to that influence during such a vulnerable period?
It's a great question.
I think the answer lies in what you could call the 4 pillars of American global influence. And they didn't operate in a vacuum, they reinforced each other.
Okay, so let's walk through them. What's the first pillar?
The most obvious one we've been talking about. Military projection.
The invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq.
Right. However controversial, they showed the U.S. could and would project force anywhere in the world. It cemented its status as the top global security provider.
And that leads into the second pillar, which would be
economy and technology. U.S. leadership in the digital economy, Silicon Valley, gave it unparalleled influence.
It wasn't just about money.
No, it was about technological superiority. In communications, data, and military tech, that reinforced the military pillar.
Okay, so military and economy. What about diplomacy? In an era of unilateral action, how did that work?
Well, the U.S. still played a huge role in international negotiations. It continued to engage in multilateral efforts like participating in the Paris Climate Agreement and built on past successes like the Oslo Accords.
So it still had that institutional power to lead on non-military issues.
It did, and that brings us to the fourth pillar,
Hmm,
humanitarian and peacekeeping aid.
soft power.
The projection of soft power, exactly. U.S. involvement in large-scale disaster relief and its support for UN peacekeeping. That reinforced its image of global leadership beyond just military might. It often won back influence that military actions might have cost.
So to sum it up, it's that combination of military and tech dominance, plus this powerful economic and diplomatic engagement that let the U.S. keep its global leadership status.
Even while it was navigating these immense challenges, yeah. It was a chaotic, defining era. The war on terror, the security versus liberty debate at home, and this deep conflict over energy and sustainability.
And that leads us to our final thought for you to consider. Given the simultaneous entrenched need for the United States to project global military power, which, as you said, still relies heavily on fossil fuels, and the scientifically urgent need to address catastrophic climate change, how does a nation reconcile those two things?
How do you reconcile long-term military and economic priorities with urgent environmental goals? That structural conflict born from the tensions of this post-2001 world, that might just be the defining cloud of our time.